Okay, this is the 5-minute podcast review for Saturday, December the 2nd, 2017, where we take a look at 5 podcasts in around 5 minutes. Jumping right in, the first podcast this episode is called The Marble Garden, and it's a simple concept, but a good one, where host Sawyer Westbrook has a fascination with cemeteries and the stories of their residents. So each episode starts with a name on a headstone and then goes on to uncover the life story behind the name. As I said, I think it's a good concept. I've definitely had the experience of wandering through a cemetery, catching a name on a grave, and wondering about the story of the person 6 feet below. So far, there are 7 episodes up. The podcast launched in July this year, and current episodes are running 10 to 25 minutes, so a fairly easy listen. If you're looking for something a bit different, something to take your mind on a storytelling journey, then check out The Marble Garden. Next podcast is 7-Minute Explainers, and this is another short episode podcast series, ideal maybe for in-the-shower listening. 7-Minute Explainers is pretty much what it says it is. Produced by The Week magazine, and that's Week as in W-E-E-K. Each episode draws from the magazine's writers and editors to explain as simply but as fully as possible, in around 7 minutes, a complex topic. So, for example, what actually is the US debt ceiling, or what exactly is the status of Puerto Rico as a US territory? At the other end of the scale, there are episodes explaining the vocal sounds used in beatboxing, or there's one episode that explains where the word dude came from. There are around 75 episodes up at the moment, with new episodes dropping weekly. It's definitely one to scroll the episode list and see if there's anything there for you, anything that catches your interest, and if it's worth subscribing to the podcast as a whole. So that's 7-Minute Explainers. On to the third podcast for this episode, which is called Game Changers Radio. So anyone with a professional interest in radio broadcasting, particularly commercial radio broadcasting or podcasting for that matter, will be interested in Game Changers Radio. The podcast series is put together and hosted by Craig Bruce, who was the head of content at Austereo, one of Australia's major FM radio networks. He's now a professional coach and mentor to new radio talent, but draws upon his old contacts in the radio industry to put together some pretty good inside info type interviews on how the commercial radio game works. Most of his interviewees are high-profile current or former on-air talent, mainly Australian, but occasionally branching out to the UK and the US. And the interviews are actually case studies on how to successfully or sometimes unsuccessfully host and run commercial radio programming. And often it's the episodes that cover the failures that are the most informative, hearing why programs were terminated, sometimes due to conflicts between on-air talent and management, even when audience ratings were high. It's also interesting to hear a range of views, all based on many years' experience, on what makes compelling radio listening and how that differs across the day from breakfast through to drive time. There's 41 episodes up at the moment, so plenty there to check out on Game Changers Radio. Moving on to podcast number 4, which is called The Way I Heard It. And apparently this is one of the most downloaded podcasts out there, though it hadn't been on my radar till just recently. The Way I Heard It is hosted by Mike Rowe, who will be known to many as the host of the TV series Dirty Jobs. Each episode runs around 7 to 10 minutes and is basically the host Mike telling a yarn, a true short story, but always with an interesting twist. The show notes describe The Way I Heard It as, quote, giving a different take on the people and events that you thought you knew. So here's a typical example from one of the most recent episodes called Strange Bedfellows.
For the life of him, Peter could not understand why anyone would want to date his 17-year-old sister. Wasn't Jane kind of annoying? And wasn't her new boyfriend kind of 21? Just imagining dopey little Jane as a sexual creature was enough to make Peter throw up in his mouth. But it was hard not to imagine such things with a grown man out on your parents' porch serenading your kid sister with silly love songs. I mean, really, how much creepier could it get? Well, as it turns out, quite a bit. Because that was the summer that Peter's underaged sister's older boyfriend was allowed to move into the attic of Peter's parents' place, otherwise known as Peter's bedroom. The situation was untenable. Every night, Peter bunked with a grown man who yearned to be in the bedroom below them, spooning with his little sister. There was an upside to this awkwardness, though. The creepy boyfriend's love songs were actually pretty good, even if they were written for jailbait. And the guy in Peter's attic cranked them out like most people change their socks. Every night, Peter found himself sitting on the edge of his bed, humming along to a new tune. One, in particular, stuck in his craw, an earworm he simply couldn't shake. One evening, the lovesick boyfriend returned to the attic and found Peter sitting on his bunk, playing his guitar, singing the song in question. The boyfriend cocked his head. "You've got a decent voice, Peter, and you can carry a tune, but that is one of the worst songs I've ever written." "Really?" said Peter. "I think it's one of your best." "Tell it to my bandmates," said the boyfriend. "They can't get past the first line without cracking up. They hate it." "Well, if you don't want it, can I have it?" "Sure," said the boyfriend. "What are you going to do with it?" What Peter did was walk into a local recording studio and sing it. A month later, the song went straight to number 1, and it didn't stop there.
Righto, well, I don't want to spoil the episode, so I'll leave the clip there, though I'm guessing at least a few of you might already have correctly worked out where that particular story leads, despite all the misdirection. Here's a hint. If you assumed the story is set in the US, it isn't. Not that it ultimately didn't have a huge impact on the US music scene. And by the way, Mike Rowe has a great voice for podcasting, as you heard, and I'm sorry that I can't sound a bit more like that. Anyway, there's around 85 episodes up now. Definitely a good one to subscribe to. And like I said, episodes are only around 7 minutes or so it's not a big commitment. But a good bit of storytelling variety to have on the playlist, or something to play when you just want to kill a few minutes. That's the way I heard it. Last podcast this episode, and another different kind of podcast, is called Beers with a Miner. And I should clarify, that's minor as in M-I-N-E-R, not minor M-I-N-O-R, which would definitely be a different sort of podcast, and probably an illegal one. Anyhow, Beers with a Miner shares stories and tips on living the mining lifestyle. The host loves beer, sport, fast cars, and has been a driver of one of those massive mining trucks for over a decade in the vast coal mines of central Queensland in Australia. Now, if you're starting to form some kind of mental image of this host, let me give you another piece of information. He is a she. The host is Leanne Drew, and some episodes are just Leanne having a bit of a rant, but many episodes are Leanne talking to other miners on current issues or hearing a few of their stories, usually over a beer. One of the things I learned listening to Beers with a Miner is that radio reception at many remote mine sites can be limited to non-existent. So podcasts, including Beers with a Miner, are filling the gap with miners sharing collections of favourite podcasts around on USB sticks. Beers with a Miner is clearly aimed at people who work in mining, and I guess also people who want to get into mining, because there's plenty of advice on how to land a mining job as well as how to keep a mining job. But there's a broader audience, and it's people like me. I'm not involved in the mining industry, but I love the opportunity to get an insight into how any industry works, hearing firsthand the issues, the jargon, and eavesdropping on the shop talk. And that's what you get listening to Beers with a Miner. So if you're in the mining industry, or even if you just want to be taken away every now and then to hot and dusty remote central Queensland, check out Beers with a Miner. And that's it. 5 podcasts in a bit over 5 minutes, and they were The Marble Garden, 7-Minute Explainers, Game Changers Radio, The Way I Heard It, and Beers with a Miner. You can find them all wherever you find your podcasts, or just use the link I've put on your screen. See you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.